So today we're going to talk about the training sequence. This is a topic that John Schub had, one of my patrons, one of our track day regulars, and overall a great guy, had requested. And so I'm definitely thought that was a great topic, one that I get questions about fairly often. Oftentimes because I offer so many different, or I'm involved in so many different training opportunities. And I've also taken several myself, and I'm going to share those with you as well. First thing I want to start off with is the classic issue about why bother, right? So this resistance to training. This is something that we've all heard about. Even our friends will say, "Hey, you've got this great opportunity. I took this class, and you should try it." I don't know. And so you get a lot of hemming and hawing, and people are resistant, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I think I know a few of them. Depends on the actual course, but more times than not, people are just intimidated. They don't really want somebody critically looking at their riding. So that's a barrier for a lot of people. And I understand that, I do. That's why if, people like how easygoing I am when it comes to training, because that's how I like to be trained. That's how I like anybody that I'm learning from to approach it. So if they knew that I was, easygoing and I'm not really judgmental and all that stuff, then it's all good. But, the image of a lot of instructors is like the drill sergeant. And when I was first an Msf instructor back in the mid 90s, that was how they trained us. It was very much kind of drill instructor-like, and it turned people off. There's no doubt about that. And there was an awful lot of yelling and barking and things like that. So that's something that if people ever had that experience back then it could carry over as far as thinking that's what you're going to get when you approach some sort of advanced training later in life. The other thing is just that training in general sort of comes off as school, and a lot of people are just happy enough to be far away from school than they could be, and they might not have had a great experience. Some people are real learners, and that's something that I know my wife, Carolyn, she's just a learner. That's just what she does almost as a hobby, is just learn. And so that's great, but everybody's different. So you have to look at what your motivations are. The resistance, though, goes back and is reinforced oftentimes by, the fact that, hey, I've been riding for X amount of years, 20 years, and I've never had a serious accident. So I must be doing something right. Hell, I could be an instructor, and that's, there might be some people out there like that, but the idea then goes back to, you don't know what you don't know. And so it's very likely that you're measuring yourself through some blinders. And you oftentimes experienced riders, even if they're accomplished, like their riding is pretty good, they can't explain how they do it. And so one problem with that is that if they get into trouble, and you need to be able to self-evaluate. And most riders can't really do that because they don't know what they're doing. They just do it. Is there anything wrong with that? Well, no. But if you want to actually consciously and purposefully increase your proficiency, then that would be, a motivation for really seeking out something other than just seat time. Another thing oftentimes that people will say is, I don't need training. I ride slow, or I ride conservatively. And, while riding safely and, whatever that is, you can really sort of debate that, what safe really is not always safe. And I've ridden with students who really leaned really hard on the idea that they ride slow in traffic, and they never go on the highway, and it's all, well, they actually rode more in a risky manner by taking that approach, as opposed to having an approach that's more assertive, that doesn't let things happen to you. You probably heard me say that a lot. That's actually a staying safe term that really resonates with me. Just don't let it happen. That takes a real active sort of approach to riding, and being passive and just going slow and hoping for the best is just not a great strategy. So the motivation, why would you spend money and time doing this? Well, it ends up being, yeah, safer. You end up being a safer rider, and that means that you can manage situations. More likely you're going to be able to survive some situations that really other people really won't really be able to, those who are untrained. So safety is obviously a, one thing, but safety can't be the motivator for most people, because safety is sort of something that we don't ride motorcycles to be safe. So if safety is your number one reason, it probably comes from, you've either had a crash and you're really anxious for that not to happen again, perfectly good motivation, or you're, that you just have been sort of talked into the fact that you need to take training so that you will be safer, so you'll come home at the end of the day. That's great motivation, no problem there. However, when it comes to a marketing sort of point of view, people won't take training unless they have a real motivation that's probably usually beyond just safety. So what is it? Well, it's more fun. That's the MSF has that saying of the more you know, the better it gets, and it's true. But there's more to that, because that's also very vague too. Is that it's more fun? How is it more fun? Well, if you learn to ride with a certain level of proficiency that most people don't experience, you are much more engaged with your riding and with your motorcycle. That comes from, you'll find it if you really engage with the road and using cornering lines, and then you start really working on timing and fine precision, and your riding just becomes there's a different dimension to riding when you do that. The satisfaction, the riding in the zone concept is much more likely if you have a purposeful approach to riding a motorcycle. And how do you do that? Well, you learn the techniques and you practice them and you get better at them. You recognize when you get it right. There was it DK today? He posted a really nice text. He sent it to me where he expressed how he had an aha moment, and it made him laugh in his helmet. And it was like terrific. This guy's been riding for years and years, and it just really made it different for him. So his next ride and every ride after this is going to be different for him. And it's a smallish thing. It's really, but it's starting to think about your riding more than you probably have, certainly more than most people have. And the other thing is that it keeps riding fresh. If you've been riding for a long time, there are ways you can keep it fresh. You can go on, trips abroad. You can start camping. You can do long distance touring. You can take up dirt riding. There's a lot of things you can do to keep motorcycling fresh. But if you're pretty much going to stick to the road and stick to the street, and you're going to not really endeavor too far beyond that, because maybe you're, just for whatever reason, that this alone is something that can actually re-engage you with your motorcycling. So these are that's the motivations for really seeking training. So I'm going to talk about a lot of different training opportunities. A lot of them you're going to, it's not just going to be a list. I really want to talk more about the benefits of them, and the sequence in the end. I'll sort of give you what I think is it's a common sequence. So let me give you my history first, because I want you to know that, I hate to say it, even I continue to train. I posted a video yesterday. It must have been yesterday, of Paul Duvall following me on the racetrack last Monday. And he's very fast. He's an expert level racer, and really fast expert level racer. And somebody that actually, believe it or not, I trained him when he was a new rider. I was his MSF coach. And now he's, I can't anywhere near keep up with him. And he's a quite accomplished instructor himself now. So anyhow, I asked him to follow me and video me, and he had critique, and it was really valid and it was really valuable. And seeing it on the video again, that's so super valuable, and that's why I do it on the street, is provide video. And I'm always learning. And I asked him outright. I said, "All right, what can I do better?" And he had some great insight. And it's nothing I could not have shared, even recognized myself. And that's something I want to talk about, is self-awareness. But when it's you don't recognize it. It's just the way it is. So when I see it on the video, I go, "What the hell am I doing that for?" And sure enough, Paul says, "Well, you're really sweeping out wider than you need to here." And I go, "Yeah, I know, really, why?" And then I started thinking about it and going, "Well, there's a certain factor about the motorcycle. It's a new bike to me, blah, blah, blah. But don't never blame your equipment when it's, not your equipment." So anyhow, let me give you the history. So I'm learning as well. My history is that I never took an MSF course because I started riding in 1970 on the street in 1976, and there really wasn't any training. It was more or less your father showed you how to use a clutch, and then you bounced off a few rocks and fell down a lot, and then off you went. And that's kind of how I learned. And it wasn't until, and I had mini bikes and dirt bikes, and then eventually I was on the street, and I went road racing in 1986 without any formal training at all. Now, that said, you did have to take the Penguin School, which is still in business today, but it's more like a race prep school, and it teaches you the flags and makes sure that you can operate a motorcycle safely with a whole bunch of other people out there and racing, and they sign off on you basically. But not a lot of, no, I didn't remember really getting any technique instruction or anything like that. So that was in the mid 80s. And then I became an MSF instructor in 1995. That's when the learning really started happening, because, I was a pretty good rider. And I must say, even now looking back, I won races and stuff like that. So I could physically handle a motorcycle. And I had ridden a lot. I had toured, a lot on my street motorcycle. So there was an awful lot I knew. And when it came to the MSF program, I had to learn it from the perspective of an instructor and as a student, because that was another part of this, is that I'd never taken the course, and I had to take the course essentially to be able to teach the course. So, and then I learned all the back, what was behind the curtain to actually teaching the course. And it was fascinating. It really did change, my awareness of riding a motorcycle. And so it was a real eye opener. And so becoming an instructor, that's something I was going to mention later, but if you are at a point also that you've really become accomplished at riding a motorcycle, you've learned a lot, and you want to learn even more and want to share it, consider being an MSF instructor. I've had a few street students that I said, if you want to, you'd be a great MSF instructor, because they've got really solid understanding of how a motorcycle operates and what the fundamentals are, and they can of course ride well. So so I'm up to for me was the MSF training, and then I took the California Superbike school in I think 2000, and that was my first track school, and I was just starting to do track days myself. I had been involved in Tony's track days then, but really we were only doing like one track day a year back then. And now it's 25 years we've been doing this. So I did the California Superbike school, and I learned some, it was, I don't know, that was a little confusing to me, because I think it's a great program, but I didn't really seem to, take away a whole lot. My wife, Carolyn, went with me, and she rode her bike, of course, and she learned an awful lot. And so, it's always about where you're at. And if you can have personal instruction, that's when the instructor can customize the instruction for you. And that's why I do my one-on-one on the street, and even the private instruction on the racetrack. We can customize it. Limitations of group training. I also did, there's an ADV adventure bike course that I took at Americade a few years ago with Jimmy Lewis. And that was great. The Tiger was new to me, so that was really good for me to get out there and learn all the techniques. I've been riding dirt bikes since I was a kid, but adventure bikes they've got their own, idiosyncrasies. I also did a couple flat track schools. And why would I do that? Because it's fun. And also it teaches you a whole heck of a lot about traction and traction management. and body positioning and throttle management, and just it goes on and on. Vision. So I did a flat track school, sort of a private one that was just organized by some of the track day instructors. And we did that in New York with PJ Jacobson, who is a world superbike racer and lives in New York. And that was great. It was really fun. And then, I don't know now, 2 years ago, it must have been 3, went down to Texas with, again, a whole bunch of Tony's Track Days staffers. And we did the Colin Edwards boot camp. And that's a flat track experience too. And he has also what they call a TT course, which is, yes, he's got an oval, but also it goes out into another bigger area, and it has lefts and rights. So it's like a road course. You're on TTR 125s with a street rear tire and a knobby front. So the whole point is to drift and get the rear to kick out, and flat track. If you've never seen flat track, it's, Google it. So that's what I've done. And that, there's other things I'm pretty sure that I don't remember. I've done seminars, watched seminars, done a lot myself, of course, but have always taken advantage of workshops and seminars and that sort of thing to oftentimes for training to be a better instructor. So even that, in that way, that I'm learning techniques for being a better instructor and seeing how other people do it. Oh, I didn't put down, I took the Stay Safe program with Eric Troe. That was back when we were considering sort of partnering up. And so that was eye-opening too, just to see how Eric did it. And I was doing essentially the same thing, but it was just terrific to see how he sort of managed his students, and it was all street training. So that's what I've done. Now let's talk about just what maybe you've done. And I don't know who you are, but Ed Condon from New England Riders, NER, on Facebook, the Facebook group, he put a poll out about, what training have you done? And the recent numbers are that 75 people have done track day training. And so that's pretty awesome. I know that, our non-sport bike track days have drawn in a lot of NER nerds. And so I'm pretty proud that we've got 75. We actually get many more than that. So, there's some people aren't chiming in. 25 people did one-on-one coaching. And then 21 people have done street training, and that would be with me or with Staying Safe. 13 people did dual sport and off-road. So that's great. And there's not a lot of training, to be honest with you, with off-road. There's like the dirt bike school for Msf. I'll talk about that. But there's not a whole lot of off-road training around here. There should be more. I do ADV mostly and beginner off-road stuff. Then there's 5 people took a race school. And by the way, I'm one of all of these because I've done all of these. And then 3 people took Superbike school, and then 2 people did flat track. So then again, I'm one of them. I think Eric Troe is the other flat track guy. So that's just kind of an interesting sort of look at what some of you folks are doing. I know a lot of you also are track day friends and customers of ours. And I'm going to talk a little bit in detail about track day training as well. So let's talk about the training situation, right from the perspective of, okay, I'm somebody who's been riding for however many years. It doesn't really matter how long, unless you're brand new, then that's almost a different conversation. But let's say you've been riding for a year, 2 years, 20 years, doesn't really matter. I still see the common weaknesses. Now, why would I see the same weaknesses in somebody who has been riding only 1 year or 1.5 years as I would with somebody who's been riding for maybe 30 years? Frankly, it's because most people stop learning after the first year. That's that idea of, you've heard me say it before, somebody oftentimes has 30 years of experience, but it's really 1 year of experience repeated 30 times. So that's why I get the same situations come up with students no matter how long they've been riding. And some of them are just really countersteering, yeah, everybody countersteers. You've been doing it the day you rode a bicycle, but to be aware of it, And so those are some things that I focus on to make sure that I just get that out of the way. More times than not, that's not a big deal. Vision is huge. And so some of the things that we work on with that is reading the road so that you're looking farther ahead, but you're looking at specific things. And that's again, the difference between when you just ride and then, because you're doing the same thing, but when you become conscious of what you're doing, that's when it's a game changer, and you can refine it, and you can be self-aware and self-analyze and self-evaluate just how accurate you're being with your entry speeds and things like that. The other weaknesses tend to be just timing and intensity. That's a term that again came up on Facebook again today with the track day group. But that is another thing, is just oftentimes people just are a little cumbersome about how hard they brake, when they brake, when they transition to the throttle, even coming to a stop, like a smooth stop. The intensity of the front brake needs to be reduced, otherwise you're going to lurch forward. And I see it from people who've been riding forever. So more times than not, people lurch to a stop, and oftentimes they don't. It's not partly because they're not using the rear brake; they're coming out with their outriggers, and so these are things I correct. But that's really common. Now, other things that I work on and see with my students is slow speed maneuvers. And everybody wants to learn how to, ride a motorcycle so it doesn't fall over in a parking lot. And I did that whole last webinar was on that. So we work on that, using the rear brake and using it effectively, and knowing when to use it. That's a big thing. Again, this is all points of things to learn, and based on what I have experienced with my students. Trail braking is very weak. Most people know what it is, or not know, but they've heard of it, but they couldn't explain it. And then so we work on that, and these aren't optional, really. Is trail braking optional? No, not really, because there are times when you are going to need that skill. You don't use it all the time necessarily, but you really need that in your toolbox. Emergency braking. Geez, I'd say like 85% of my students don't brake hard enough. They just have never done it before. So that's a real important thing. I don't even have to talk to you about that. It's important to be able to get your bike stopped in as short a distance as you can. And that's something you have to practice. I'm going to talk about practice later. Visualizing, this is back to vision and reading the road, visualizing what's around a blind corner. How do you do that? Well, you actually train yourself to do that. You visualize based on what you see and reading the road, the angles of the converging parallels, the guardrail and the painted lines, what is likely to be around that corner. I'm not talking about, sand and things like that. You can't see that. I'm talking about the shape of the radius of the corner. And that will then allow you to have a more accurate entry speed. You have to develop your mind's eye, is what you're doing. You're able to use the clues that you have and interpolate so that you come up with a pretty good idea of what that corner is going to be like. And then you set yourself up properly for it, outside entry, slow yourself down properly for it. And sure enough, as you come around, it's either going to confirm you got it right or, didn't quite get it right, but you're going to be pretty close. But if you just sort of willy-nilly go into corners without really thinking about it and not really paying attention to what you're seeing, there's going to be times when you're going to, be one of those people that runs off the road or just goes wide in a corner and then says, geez, that corner was completely blind. I had nothing I could do. Well, wrong. You didn't do what you could have done because you didn't know any better. And that goes back to the idea of cornering lines too, is when you start to really engage with the motorcycle and the road, knowing the effective cornering lines and why you do it, and then the fact that they're safer. It's safer for you to actually do an effective cornering line. But I'll talk about that more in another webinar. Now, what's the typical sequence of somebody who starts riding? Well, sadly, most people are self-taught. That's changing some. There are mandated programs in some states, not in Massachusetts. You can just, show up at the RMV and take a road test, a written test and a road test and get your license. The MSF course, the Massachusetts Rider Education Program, does waive the RMV road test. So, or, you know, the riding test. So that if you do take that, then it gives you kind of a leap, a stepping stone past the RMV, Registry of Motor Vehicles, those of you who are in other states that have different names for your program. So most people are self-taught. Certainly if you started riding before the MSF, that's one reason. So that's really common. So people my age, typically that's the situation. However, a lot of people that are my age will have stopped riding for a while and then they come back to riding. Smart ones, we call returning riders, will go and get training. They'll go back, they'll go to an MSF class, even though it's a basic, it's called a basic or beginner class. Smart, very smart, because you think you actually have all the skills you need, but they go dormant. So you do need to kind of get yourself trained. Now, it doesn't mean you can't operate a motorcycle, that's different. But to be able to not only operate it, but to be able to control it at a higher level is really something you have to train for. Now, a lot of people, when you say self-taught, they can also, that's sort of talking also about a friend of yours or an experienced, you know, your father or somebody who's been riding a long time, a neighbor. They give you pointers in the parking lot and then off you go. That would be considered self-taught. Statistically, there's some issues with self-taught because you're getting trained mostly in the operation of the bike. This is the clutch, this is the throttle, and off you go. And well, that's, you know, fine for getting around a parking lot. First tight corner you get into with somebody, you know, some sort of hazard, and the rider's not going to know anything about how to handle that. A basic MSF course does cover that stuff. So let's talk about that. We'll talk about the MSF, like parking lot courses, that's what we're going to call them. The MSF, Motorcycle Safety Foundation, is the program that most states use, Massachusetts being one of them. Others use the Lee Parks Total Control program. But again, we're going to sort of lump those together. There's the basic course, which is the course that, again, some states require people to take to get their license, but not in Massachusetts. So, and some of them are like under a certain age, you need to take the course. And so again, your state could be different. But then the MSF goes beyond that. And so they do the basic course. They do offer a whole bunch of other courses. If you go to the MSF website, it's msf-usa-.org, that there's a whole thing about, you know, actually I've got it right here. You won't be able to read it. I'm not expecting you to, but this is all the programs that they offer. So it's pretty extensive. However, good luck finding most of those, because it ends up that the way it's structured, it's really hard for training programs to actually either make any money if they are a for-profit company, or if the states just, they don't have the resources to be able to offer all that stuff. So they are there, but again, good luck with finding some of them. There's the basic e-course that they started, which is an online course. That's something that's been around a little bit. So there's ways of getting training, even if, and that's really good for a lot of people, like in the middle of Kansas. The closest MSF range that they had was hundreds of miles away. So even though they did need to come and ride, at least then if they could do some of the classroom portion with the e-course. I do believe that's free, something you can actually take and then, you know, sign up for a course. There's also the BRC2. BRC is for basic rider course. BRC2, which used to be more or less like the experienced rider course. You use your own motorcycle, but it's essentially the same course. And then there are other more advanced courses that they do offer, including they have this street course like what I do, but I don't know anybody who actually does it. You know, correct me if I'm wrong. There's also like a military course and the dirt bike school, which I mentioned. There are some folks in Massachusetts who are doing the dirt bike school, mostly down in southeastern Mass, although others might be. I haven't been really paying attention so much about that. It's very basic, and they do provide bikes, which is great. Okay, so that's the MSF parking lot course. Let me see. Other parking lot. So there, well, let's go over this. Let's say now we're in the sequence. You're self-taught, okay, or you're returning and you're going to take an MSF course, or right from the get-go, you're going to take the MSF course, which is the way to go. All right. I don't care what your opinion is of the course and that sort of thing, because there's, it's just that it's the best way to just get you on a motorcycle, even if you don't own one. As a matter of fact, I recommend you don't own one until you take the course. So many people that came to the classes when I was teaching, they were kind of shaky. I wasn't quite 100% sure that they should be on a motorcycle. And then they would tell me they have a brand new Harley sitting in the garage just waiting for them. It's like, oh my God, no pressure, right? So use the motorcycles that the training organization provides. They even offer helmets, but that can be a little funky. So but get a helmet. But then then you got no pressure. See if it's for you or not. And so the MSF course is really the way to go. Do that. Just get it done. Get your license through that way. And now what? Well, that's where most people stop, if they ever take the MSF course at all. And we never saw, like, we would try to give away experienced rider courses. Nobody would show up, free, and nobody would show up. And again, it goes back to what I originally talked about, is that people don't want to be, they're intimidated by being looked at by an instructor, and whatever reason that they don't want to come. Take one, half a Saturday, and couldn't do it. So we tried getting groups to come, and it was a little more successful, but it was very difficult to get people to do any training past the most basic training. And again, heaven forbid we get any experienced riders, thinking that they need training, because, especially men who are born to ride. Women typically are much more open to training. I mean, by far, about half of the students were women when I was teaching. So what are the things? All right, so now you've taken the MSF course. As you go along, let's say you've taken it, what's the next step? Well, there's a lot more to know. That, yes, there's more training to be done. If you are wanting to be a good rider and the safest rider you can be, you have to go beyond the basic course. The basic course, a lot of people will say it teaches you how to ride a motorcycle in a parking lot at 20 miles an hour. And in some ways that's true. It does do better than that, but because my advanced parking lot course is also from 20 to 25 miles an hour. But the training, the techniques that we work on are definitely applied to street speeds. By the way, I do have openings for advanced parking lot course at the end of July, and I've only have 2 people signed up. So I'll take 10 people. So I'm going to be pumping that a little bit more so I can actually hold it. They usually do sell out, but a little slow this year, I guess. So you've taken a MSF course. Now what? All right, so how about reading? That's a great thing to do, right? Especially in the off season. You can learn a lot. There's a lot of books. I've got a ton of books, actually. Look at all these books I have from my library. I've got more, but this is just some of the highlights. Including my own books, right? Riding in the Zone and Motorcycling the Right Way. So they are reading books is great. There's a lot of points of view. Sometimes we say the same thing, because riding a motorcycle has not been reinvented just because somebody came out with a new book. There are new ways of saying things, and there are new technologies that need to be addressed. But mostly the information is valid. So, but reading doesn't make you a better rider. It is a step toward it. So reading and even online sources, there's a lot of video out there, which, there's this guy, got him here, Canyon Chasers, I think MC Rider. Those guys are doing an awful lot. MC Rider's, pretty basic stuff. He taps into some of the more advanced things, but essentially what I found with him is it's more or less MSF based, at least his early stuff. But there's good stuff. It's really good stuff out there online. A lot of books out there, like I said. Proficient Motorcycling by Dave Huff. It's probably the most read book. It's my mentor, who I took over from an MCN. There's pictures of me in this book, by the way. And so that's a great one. That's sort of an overall one. I do say, here's another thing I'll point out. People ask me, which book should I buy of yours, Ken? And Riding in the Zone is more of the fundamentals, the foundation stuff, but it does talk about the advanced things that newer riders should know and practice. And there are practice sort of drills in that book. In the other book, it's more of scenarios and anecdotes and more of the mental aspect of riding. I like both books. But then why wouldn't I? So the other thing is seminars, things like that. I did a bunch of seminars at Harley dealerships over the winter, and I'd get 100 people show up for those things. You know, it was great. I really reached a lot of folks. There is a YouTube video on my YouTube channel that's of one of those seminars that I did in a Harley dealership in, I think it was in Vermont. And unfortunately, the videographer was just somebody from like the service department who had a camera, but it's gotten, I think, 200,000 views because it's on cornering. And it's actually, I think, it's an hour long, but I recommend you look at that. But so that's just another example of that there is good stuff out there. However, it's not all good. So make sure that you sort of double check your sources, and if you're going to share this information with a newer rider, like you're the person who is going to self-teach somebody else, make sure you know your stuff. I mean, because you can really lead them up the wrong road, and that would be a real problem. Double check your sources. But remember, this stuff, knowledge doesn't make you a better rider. It poises you to become a better rider, right? You have to put it into practice. So there's some other parking lot courses. Let's talk about those. My parking lot course we've talked about. If you're wondering what I teach, it's all on my website, ridinginthezone.com. It's got descriptions about all the things we work on and everything. There's also like Ride Like a Pro. I know some people have taken that because it's offered up here occasionally. There's also Moto Mark 1. He's down in North Carolina. And those two have the motor officer training. And that's where you see the cops on the big Harleys going around cones like crazy, like a gymkhana, moto gymkhana. And it's amazing stuff. It really is. And, I would have a hard time, doing what they do, but it's a specialty training. And, sometimes you can think of that as like circus tricks, it's really cool, but is it going to make you a better rider? Certainly it can't hurt. It's certainly good to, riding a motorcycle in control, and they're not exactly going slow. Like they're up to a speed that has pretty good stability. They're just able to really heel the bike over and to control the throttle and the speed, and to really get the handlebars turned just right and stay within those cones. True slow speed maneuvers is 3 miles an hour. Again, refer back to my last video, my last webinar. And same with Ride Like a Pro and Motomark. Great skills. If you get an opportunity to take those courses, do it. Absolutely. It all adds up. It all adds up to becoming, a real strong foundation. Street courses. All right. So we're done with parking lot. So you're consider doing that. Those aren't too intimidating. And then you start thinking about, well, do these things really apply to the street? It's a good question. And we've had that question about track days too, that street courses now seem to be pretty obvious. Like if I have an instructor follow me on the street, on my motorcycle, on roads, particularly roads that I've never seen before, hopefully challenging enough roads, that I'm going to learn something. Yeah, you are. So I have my training, and also Staying Safe with Eric Troe. He's got his training is based out of Pennsylvania. I think he's taken this COVID year off, but I am doing some training. So those street courses are rare. They're not really around. There's a few people doing it, but gee, I think I'm like one of 5 people, and I'm only the only one in the Northeast that's doing it. And but even so, you'd think the demand would be really high. Last year I think I had 60 students, and that included my parking lot students. So I think like 45 street students. Not bad for one person, one instructor, but you can see there's thousands and thousands of riders out there. Now they don't know about me, I get that, but I'm publicizing as much as anybody really can. So if street training is really, if street riding is what you're doing, then that street training thing is really something you should consider, because it is applying very directly the road reading skills, and then applying things like trail braking and advanced skills in situations that you encounter every day. Let's see, what time is it here? Keeping an eye on things. Okay, 45 minutes. We're doing pretty good. We'll open up for questions in just a few minutes, and they're going to be general questions. Let's see, track courses. Now I want to talk about track days, because you've heard me talk about, that's what I've been doing, an instructor for 25 years with Tony's Track Days. And we've opened up and we've introduced the non-sport bike track days about, I don't know, 5 years ago. And that was my brainchild, because I knew that the customers we have for our normal track days are, the sport riders and people who kind of show up to go fast, although we teach them how to go fast safer. And we've always been a training oriented track day organization. So that's been our motivation, but not enough people of the big scale of potential students, track students, were coming. We get 90 people. That's a normal full day for us, spread out over different groups. So it's not 90 people on the track at the same time, more like 20, 25 or so. And, but we weren't reaching the people that needed it, which were the broader audience, the broader community of motorcyclists, which is people that ride just regular bikes, cruisers and tours and adventure bikes and standards and all whatnot, dual sport bikes even. So we opened up this non-sport bike thing. The training itself is more school-like. We definitely I've set it up that way. But you really could show up at a regular track day and get as much out of it, because it's training oriented. It's just that people won't show up on their Harley at a regular track day where all around them is going to be sport bikes or sporty standards or sport tours. We do get those on our regular days all the time. So to open it up and say, like, okay, it's only non-sport bike people only, that was a marketing thing. And we have evolved it into being more of a school than, I put more effort into it being a school. Like the curriculum is more comprehensive. There's other schools, and like I mentioned before, I took the California Superbike School. That's Keith Code's school. They travel around. They're mostly in West Coast. It's good. They've got a program that's really broken down. You have to take level 1 before you can take level 2. So, and it's multiple times. You can kind of gang up, and you can do level 1 one day and level 2 the next day. And then it goes up. I think they have 4 levels or something like that. And you can rent a motorcycle. They have S1000RR BMWs, and you can say, "Oh, I don't want that." Well, they put it in like rain mode, and it can be a docile bike, docile enough anyhow. There's also like Reg Pridmore and Jason Pridmore. They've got classes, again, mostly West Coast. There's the Yamaha Champion School with Nick Einash, and they do operate more like in New Jersey. They've got New Jersey Motorsports Park, and also out west. And then there's Street Masters. Again, these are, get the thing here is that they're almost all out west. Street Masters is only in California. So there's a lot out there, but for what most street riders want, we kind of offer the only real opportunity to come onto the racetrack and have it be a racetrack closed course training opportunity. And the whole thing about why would I want to do that? Please, I posted up on the NER Facebook group the latest article I wrote for Backroads Magazine, and all the typical questions, and I answer all of them, hopefully successfully. But please consider coming. It's really fun. I mean, ask any of the people who've come, and they will confirm that. Okay, let me talk about track day training itself. Those of you who are track day riders already, and I do get a lot of questions from people who are curious about coming to a track day, and they just aren't quite sure what to expect. There's a whole article that I wrote on the Tony'sTrackDays.com site that it talks about what you can expect your first track day. But first timers, you will feel a little overwhelmed. It's because not because you may feel stressed to go fast and all that. We will assure you that that's not why we want you to be here, and that's not why you're here. It's to learn. So the classroom is going to be your friend. Sometimes people say, hey, I want personal instruction. You know, how many track days have you done? Well, it'll be my first track day. I say no, because you've got enough to learn just about figuring out the environment of the racetrack. And it's different. There's no painted lines, no oncoming traffic. And the track is quite wide. So there's a lot that you can feel a little disoriented on a racetrack. You just learn the things like getting on and off the track, and then like the basic lines so that we're all on the same page. That's almost enough right there for your first track day. We do talk about passing, safely passing and being passed. You're gonna learn about braking, and that's just something that, you know, we'll talk about certainly in the classroom, but you're gonna learn just how hard you can brake on your motorcycle. You've probably never experienced it before. We'll talk about trail braking and that sort of thing. That's just your first couple of track days. So after that, then you've got for more, and we will talk about some technique stuff, you know, like trail braking and a few other things, body position. But once you're an experienced track day rider, then what's next? Well, then it becomes more of a precision thing where you take basically the fundamental slow look, press and roll, which is the MSF sequence for cornering. That's essentially what you do on a racetrack, because riding a motorcycle is riding a motorcycle. It's just, you do it at a different environment and with a different purpose. But and that's why track day training absolutely transfers to the street, because it's the techniques you're learning are the same. It's just what you do. To varying degrees, you're not going to trail brake so much on the street. You're not going to brake so hard on the street, but you sure learn how to operate your motorcycle on a higher level, a higher way. But then once you're an experienced track day rider, your braking is going to be more precise as you get more and more experienced and comfortable with that, because the G's of braking is actually as uncomfortable to newer riders or to people that aren't used to it as is lean angle and lateral forces. So we'll be looking at the precision of your braking so that you get to a correct entry speed for you, and then the precise actions, locating yourself better on the track and learning your lines. That's what we teach when we're doing personal instruction in even the most advanced groups. Is it's incrementally more precision is what you're looking for. Your timing and intensity is more accurate. You talk more about body positioning, yeah, but body positioning doesn't oftentimes hinder people until they're at the really high level. And then little things matter more. Hitting your apexes is, you know, you can get away with it when you're going slower, but when you go faster, you know, inches matter. Whereas when you're a newer rider, you know, track day rider, then, you know, you can miss your apex by a few feet and it's not going to really affect you too much. Okay, so there's more about that, but I just, you know, I want to keep it to that level. There are also some specialty courses beyond track days. I mentioned before, flat track, off-road training. There's that. Adventure bike training. There's the BMW Rider Academy, which is down in North Carolina, South Carolina. Brett Tex, which is where John DiCarlo is going next week. ADV training, off-road. I did Jimmy Lewis Dirt Days at Americade. They always have somebody there for training. And now what? Okay, so we've talked about all the courses you can take and all the things you can pay money to do and to learn. But what's next? Well, it's ongoing practice. So again, like reading doesn't make you a better rider. Going to one track day is going to make you a better rider, but it's not going to make you the best rider you can be if you just don't consciously practice the stuff that you've learned. And so ongoing practice is really the thing that makes technique into habit. Okay, so you can learn technique. That's great. You can demonstrate it really well. But if you don't really kind of keep it on the forefront of your muscle memory and your consciousness, then you're going to start to, you can't really make it a habit. And I see a lot of riders show up and have to break their habits, spend a lot of time just breaking habits, bad habits. And so once you get the good skills, make sure you reinforce them and keep practicing them. So what to practice? When you're in a parking lot, first off, how do you practice parking lot? You know, find some open parking lot. There's a lot now because a lot of businesses aren't even open. So the parking lot practice is going to give you that like 25-mile-an-hour speed training, but that's okay. You can really practice counter steering, swerving, emergency braking, braking in corners, emergency braking in corners. All that stuff can be done in a parking lot. Lean more. So go in circles. Don't get yourself dizzy. Go both directions. Lean more than you have before. Drag floorboards if you've never done it before. That can all be done in the parking lot. But practice your skillful cornering. Don't just go out there and hammer the throttle and and lean the bike all the way over and crash. You have to be able to apply the proper slow look, press, and look and roll technique. And timing and intensity has to be accurate. So you have to learn this stuff, and then you go out and practice it, including body positioning. That's something that absolutely is something that I teach my students on the street. It's subtle, but once you start to get, the idea that it's another tool to use, then you find opportunities to use it. Okay, so now we've practiced. Great, excellent. Now, remember, parking lot practice, it can be two types. One is the slow speed stuff, like the ride like a pro, like tight U-turns and that kind of thing. And then there's speed practice, which is more like what I do in my advanced parking lot courses, where we, even at 25 miles an hour, we practice trail braking, and we practice body position, and we practice emergency braking. So that's less about just, going around cones. But self-practice and friend practice. So self-practice is what I call when you go out before a ride and you just find an empty parking lot and you just do a few things. Don't spend 15, 20 minutes at it. Just go around, do some quick stops, and then do some circles and do some tight U-turns and then get off on your ride. If you have a favorite friend, make that an event, or a group. You just go to a parking lot and just you don't need cones. You just do stuff. All right. That's worth it. It's absolutely is how you make techniques, habits. All right. I mentioned before about mentoring, or like if you get to be a point where you're a pretty high proficient rider, consider becoming an Msf instructor. They're always looking for them because there's turnaround. It's a lot of weekends and in the sun and that kind of thing. So people are good for a few years doing it. I did it for 25 years. But you've got that opportunity. Also, if you do teach your neighbor or whatever, make sure that you've got a good idea about what you're doing. You cannot teach or press somebody to do things that they're not ready for. And experienced riders are notorious for assuming that new riders know things when they don't. And so you kind of will skip over the basics, the real basics that they need. And then suddenly they're, careening into a chain link fence. So there are ways out there that you can sort of learn more about what the MSF does. And so if you're going to do that, just do it right. Okay. Sharing what you learned from what you learned from schooling, share that with your riding friends on your Facebook page, and the forums that you're on. Say, hey, you know what I learned that I thought was really cool, and share that stuff. But be sure to check your knowledge before teaching others or sharing others, because I see all the time people saying, well, this is how you do it. No, not quite, and I have to say something, otherwise I feel a little bit obliged to do that and not let them go on spreading, wrong information. Okay, so that's what I have there. So let's just do a real bit of a recap. So the sequence of training, again, it can be skipped around a little bit, but the MSF, all right, parking lot, that would be, an MSF class parking lot, could be the slow speed stuff, like the ride like a pro, can be the cone thing, or it can be something that's more street oriented. And again, remember, there's two types of slow. There's slow like they do with the motor cops, which is kind of fast, staying within the cones. And then there's more of a wider range parking lot course where slow is tight U-turns, which that's where more people have trouble. And plus, like what I do that, and plus the trail braking sort of street training. So that's MSF, parking lot, more ongoing parking lot, street training, track training, specialty training, and then ongoing practice. One question I get a lot is, should I take your street training before I take the track day? Or should I take the track day before the street training? It can be interchangeable. I do think that the benefits of taking the track training is it's concentrated. So you really get a lot of information and you get to practice it on a racetrack. Throughout the course of a day, you revisit each corner, many, many times in an hour or whatever, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So that's one way to look at that. The other thing is, if you take the street training, that's good. You don't need the track training to take the street training. So if all you're going to do is ride the street, and you want to learn how to, like, maybe you're going to Europe and you want to ride the Alps, and the street training would make more sense because it's more about reading the road. But track day training is going to give you a lot of the physical skills and give you comfortable with leaning and braking. Okay, so that's all I have. So I hope that was helpful. Now, questions, whether it's pertaining to this topic or any other topic, I am ready to field. John, take it away.
Hey, Ken, how are you? So I have just a few questions today. You've been covering things so efficiently that I don't think that you left a lot of questions out there. But let me start off by reading what we have. So John Pierce doesn't have a question, but he says, so we're all here. So I'm unsure why we need the reasons to go through training. And, so we're preaching to the choir. How do we get the word out to everyone else?
So, John, you and I are, kindred spirits, because I know that everybody here is my choir. And that's why I keep reaching out to you. We've got 44 people here that at least, there's got to be at least 44 other people. If you know one other person that really could use this, really get any way you can to try to get them to join in and to take training with you. Take training and say, hey, I'm going, you want to come along? That's how you start to do that. It's sharing the information as much as you can. Be a disciple of whoever you want to follow. Share their online content. Share the things that you've learned. That's kind of how you do it. And then when you're riding with groups, if you do that, that's also an opportunity. If anybody kind of is curious about, why do you do that in a corner or something, then there's an opportunity for you. But realistically, it's, we're only single individuals. So you do what you can. I mean, I've got a big reach myself, and, quite a bit of followers. And even so, I only have 41 people on this webinar. So it's just tough to reach out like that. But find opportunities to spread the information that you have that is accurate. And if there's somebody that you really think has got it together, share that stuff a lot, as much as you can. That's about all I can tell you. I've been trying this for my whole career, trying to reach more and more people. So,
Ken, the next question, and I can't quite make out the name. It's STTIN. KTIM, I believe, asks, Ken, how can I convince a leader of our club to understand and comprehend training at the track? He has the impression that one goes to race only.
Yeah, so if show him that article that I wrote for Backroads. I posted it in Facebook. I'm assuming you guys are in Facebook. Or send them to my website, because I've got a article called something about track days. I think it was like, myths about track days or something along those lines. And that'll answer the question. It's not, when people hear racetrack, what do they're going to say racing. I mean, that's really what we associate it with. And so it's understandable. And it really, again, it's up to you, if you can, to say it's just a road. It happens to be a closed course. So we actually probably need to eliminate that whole word of racetrack and call it a closed course training, because that's what it is. So it's tough. I get it. But all I can do is point you to my website and the articles that I've written about it. because it explains it all there. And if they still have questions, then have them, email me. But it's such a common thing. We've been battling it for years. So understand that when you try to talk to them about it, tell them all it is a road without cars coming the other way, without sand in the road at all, no gravel, no pedestrians, no intersections. And that is right there. It's the freedom to be able to focus on your riding. And on top of that, you've got classroom. It's a school. So, and realistically, if you look at the pricing of schools, that a track school, it's way more expensive than what we charge. So we're charging essentially the normal track day fee, which is around $300, I think. Depends on whether weekends are way more expensive than weekdays. And it's again, ask anybody who's taken it. It is one day that will change your life. You will learn more in one day than you will that you've probably learned in all the years you've been riding. I mean, I just hear it all the time. Now, again, I'm not needing to convince you of that. It's really, what can you do to get other people to be convinced about it? Another thing is for them to see the videos. Like, I've got videos on YouTube of the non-sport bike track days of me following, and Ed Condi's got a bunch of them too, where he's following other people. And I have one on with a Bergman out on the track, and you'll see how well the person rides, and Harleys and everything else. So then at least they get a picture of what it is, because they can't imagine it otherwise. And I understand that. I really do.
And, to that point, Ken, Lisa said, I learned more about safe cornering at one track day than I did in multiple MSF courses. And she's an MSF rider coach.
So there you go. There's a testimonial right there. The MSF is great. It's great for what it does, but it can only go so far. So Lisa, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you feel that way, because I'm not surprised at all, but I'm really glad, because you're one of those people who's going to reach a lot of other people, as they get through your class. And I know that some programs really don't want you to really go out of the boundaries much, but that's a way that you can actually influence a lot more people, because remember, most people will take the MSF course and that's it. They will not train. They will not do anything else from that point on. So if you can kind of at least get the bug in their ear that they know that it exists, that's the first step. So that's terrific. I really appreciate that.
It's a really interesting point, and I wanted to mention, because I know that we're here from multiple states. I live in Connecticut, and I applied to go through the MSF rider training coach school, and I got a reply back from our Department of Motor Vehicles saying, geez, John, due to lack of interest, we're not giving any courses. So, it's so difficult sometimes to get a critical mass of people together to get this stuff going.
It's really sad. There was a time before you could get your license through the MSF in Massachusetts that they were canceling classes left and right. So there's another thing, which is the fact that motorcycles there are fewer new motorcyclists coming along. And that's another factor. The industry's sort of on a downward trend. But yeah, that's a shame. John, you'd be an awesome instructor.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about some thoughts that I have later on after we get through these questions. But Lisa also asks, where can we access previous webinar recordings?
Oh, on my website. I have them on my YouTube channel. So they're already up there. I've got all of them on, if you go to my website, at the top, it says videos and podcasts, I think. And in there, that's where you can see them. These also, I'm turning these webinars and the Facebook Live things and the Zoom things that we've done into podcasts. So it's all on my website. I absolutely just, when we're done here, I edit it a little bit and then I get it up on YouTube. Okay. And in my YouTube channel, the little link is at the upper right-hand corner of my homepage.
It's pretty easy to find too. Chris Pippin asks, what do you think of Jim Ford's classes? Is there any knowledge?
All right, so Jim Ford, yeah, I didn't mention him before. I've heard good and bad. So, I don't know. I mean, I would probably get somebody who's got firsthand knowledge. I have had opinions of people who've taken his course. And like I say, you know, he's a nice guy and all that, but his methods, I'm not 100% sure about. He does do street training, so he is somebody on the East Coast that does it. He does it in the Blue Ridge Parkway area too. So he's got awesome roads. But I can't really vouch for him. And again, if I knew that from reputable people that said it was great, then I would say so. But I haven't really. Again, I'm going to be ambivalent about that.
And Ken, Joy Medved asks if slow speed schools are, quote, circus tricks, then how do you suggest people learn good slow speed skills?
Well, I did say that you could consider them circus tricks. I didn't say they were. They're absolutely a strong skill to learn. Absolutely. Don't think that you should not do that. You should. The thing about it is it something you do every day? Because now it's going to make you a stronger rider, no question, because you're going to feel like you can really get your bike heeled over at, whatever, 15 miles an hour, 12 miles an hour. And that's great. That is really great stuff. Because if you remember, one of my drills is for you to start dragging your floorboards in a parking lot, going in a circle. And this is that, but it's going in a course. And so, yeah, it's going to be terrific. But if you're talking about slow speed stuff like making a tight U-turn in a parking lot or turning around in a road, that's the sort of stuff that I focus on because it's just useful every single ride that you take. So absolutely hope that didn't come off, wrong, that I dissed that at all. There's no way I would diss that. It's, again, just understand that what you're walking away from is a certain thing, that's all. Okay, hope that was clear.
And then Colin Piper says, how and where did you yourself train as an on-street trainer?
I wrote, I'm going to say I'm self-taught with that. So that's a great question. What makes me qualified? That's how I guess I'll answer it, is that I was writing safety and skills articles for Motorcycle Consumer News for probably 15 years. So I knew that. I was an Msf instructor for 25 years. So I knew, all that. And I was actually even involved in teaching a lot of the Msf instructors. So there was that. And then I was a track day instructor also. So I just transferred that to the street, and including the use of communicators. And I did that on the racetrack before I ever did it on the street. And so will say that when I took the Staying Safe course, when it was Eric and I were talking about sort of collaborating, that I did learn from him that I was doing it right. So that was a confirmation, because otherwise I would not be so confident that the way I'm doing it is effective. But it was essentially the same thing he was doing. So, great minds. And Eric Trow writes for Rider Magazine. He writes the safety column for them. So I think hopefully that'll answer your question.
And Christiana Marina asks, I've only been riding about 3 years. I took MSF with no prior riding experience, and I failed twice before passing. I had a scare during MSF, and I've been fearful ever since. I've done track days and even a recent one on which I felt a little bit beyond what I was ready to absorb. I still need to learn more about the basic maneuvers. What kind of course should I take?
All right, Christiana. Hey, good to see you. I thought you were riding pretty well the other day. I understand that that apprehension is there. I would have to probably point you to the advanced parking lot course that I take is going to be something that it doesn't involve speed. One of the things that's holding you back, and it's really common for most people, is the fact that you're not only trying to focus on a technique, you're also having to manage some speed so that you are out on the track with others who are going fast. And so that it's safe, so that you're at a certain speed. For those of you who are saying, oh, I thought it wasn't a fast, it wasn't about speed. Well, it is in that, we're doing street speeds, but they're quicker than street speeds typically. In the group that Christiana is in is the novice group. And so it's mostly kind of brisk speed, street speeds around the corners. On the straightaways, people tend to go a little bit faster than the highway. But so I'm thinking that for you, that if you were to come to the advanced parking lot course, that we would be talking more about some of the things that I know we talk about in the classroom at the track, like trail braking and entry and cornering lines and things like that. But if we took the speed component out of it, I bet you that might help you. The other thing is if you wanted to come and take a street training, if your goal also is to ride on the street with more confidence, that's a no-brainer. I mean, you should definitely do that. If you take the street training, because if it's one-on-one, you and me, we can do, I can do a lot of the parking lot stuff with you, and because I can customize it. So I might then, thinking in terms of that, you might want to maybe consider coming and riding this on the street with me, and we'll focus on the things that I know that you're going to want to know for riding on the track.
And Chris asks, do you ever get down to Summit Point track? And if so, what do you think of that track?
Yeah, I haven't been to Summit Point yet. I was just listing out the tracks I've been on. I think I was up to 17, but Summit Point has not been one of them. Just not had the opportunity. I hear it's fun. I hear it's a lot of fun. Another one I hear is really fun that I haven't been to is Groton. It's in Michigan. There are a ton of them I have done, but there's a lot more that I want to do. So sorry, I can't really add much more to that.
Yeah, you're talking about hanging up your helmet. I don't think that's coming anytime too soon. Isn't that what you said earlier today? Ken, I have a question. I commute, when we're actually at work and not in the middle of a pandemic, I commute to work every day. So I ride maybe about 300 days out of 365 in the year. And how do we make every day a training day?
That's a great question. It's really about consciously being purposeful about what you're looking for. So when we're out in traffic and we are needing to apply and implement our strategies, and so you're looking for you're looking for it symbolically for opportunities to use to refine your skills. And what are those skills? They're strategies for that are going to have you predict potential problems, placing yourself in a lane position that's going to keep you as safe as you can be so that you don't let things happen to you. At the end of your ride, if it's an eventful ride, then you should be able to look back and say, I did good. I did really well. I really, minimized the risk that I would have had otherwise if I hadn't been conscious of the strategies that I know and that I practice and that I implement. But you have to do it purposefully. You really do have to be conscious of it. The other things are just, you think about, to become a better rider, you're trying to ingrain techniques, physical techniques and mental strategies into your riding every day. And how are you to make that a habit is by consciously recognizing when it's appropriate to implement those things. So on every ride, you can go out, and this sounds like work, right? But it's not. It really isn't. You just recognize, because you're already starting from a point of how to operate a motorcycle. So now it's just paying attention. It's being mindful. So when you're out on traffic, when I'm in traffic, I just get through a situation and go, wow, I nailed it. Not a damn thing happened. Nobody pulled out in front of me or anything, because if I know that if they had, the likelihood of me handling it was very high because of how I approached it. So that's really much more, when it comes to traffic, it's much more about developing your strategies and then implementing them, knowing where to put your motorcycle so that you can be seen better and so that you can see others, knowing that what sort of maneuvers can help you to avoid a situation, a hazard, and knowing that you've practiced them. and that sort of thing. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, it really does, and it helps. One of the things that I do is I keep a little journal of the mistakes that I make every time I ride, and I've realized that I make mistakes every time I ride. And
Here's another way to do it, is have another column of all the successes. Right?
yeah, coming home is a big success all the time.
It
Can
is.
I? I had another question. As you know, I am a magnificently mediocre motorcycle rider. That was very alliterative, um, but I'm a really good pilot, and as a matter of fact, I'm a certified flight instructor. And we have to, when flying airplanes, we have to train recurrency. We do recurrency training for pilots up to commercial pilot. They're called flight reviews. It used to be called biennial flight reviews every other year. And flight instructors have to do something very similar every other year. We have to re-up that certificate. How often, realistically, do you think we as motorcycle riders should be out there training?
Okay, so there's two ways of answering that. One, first, define what training is. One of them is formal training, like you decide to take a refresher course, every year. And some people do that. But is that going to advance your proficiency? Good question. It's going to maintain your proficiency, so that's good, because you do need to maintain it. It's a perishable skill. Skills are perishable, so that's good. The other part of it is just is learning, understanding the techniques and learning them, and then practicing often. So the more effective thing is that you learn, is, again, assuming you're learning the correct technique and you know how to implement it, is to practice it on your own, just regularly. Not like, again, it sounds like work. It's not. It's just eventually sort of like you just take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, if that, at the beginning of a ride, during a ride, because I do street, emergency braking from speed. And I just go, okay, there's nobody behind me, nobody there, stretch of road, it's all clean, make a quick stop. Good. You've now are working your way toward becoming a better rider. As far as the equation of like what your pilot training is, that would be something that would be much more of a formal thing, that you are getting eyes on you from a professional, and that you're getting signed off, essentially, that you're doing good, everything's fine. And even a brush up, I get students coming back year after year for the street training. And I will have, it's a great story here, is that one guy, he's been back 5 times. I think I've mentioned it before, 5 years in a row. And I asked him at the beginning of this 5th year, I said, so, what do you think? Has all this stuff we've been working on stuck? And he goes, I'm not really sure. And he's been riding a lot and everything's good, but he's just not sure. Well, we went out on the road, and it was very apparent very quickly that absolutely the stuff that we had been working on had stuck. And not only that, but it was ingrained in him. He wasn't even aware of it, because he had taken it, the training, and he had just continually applied it until now. I even told him at the end of the class, I said, if I ever hire an assistant, I'm going to call you, and he was like, wow, really? So again, that's a self-awareness thing. It's really an idea that you understand the techniques, you apply them, and then eventually it's not work. It's just not work. It's just what you do. So to answer your question, I mean, my ideal would be everybody would take, I'd say at least 1 track day a year. That's pretty minimal, because that's going to continue. You take 1 track day, like people say, oh my God, I learned more in 1 track day than I have in 20 years. Well, guess what? Your second track day, you learn even more. Maybe not as much, but at least maybe 20 or 30% more. Your next track day is going to be even more. Eventually it'll get down to, you're not going to learn a whole lot more, but that might be after 6 years of doing 1 track day a year. But 1 year is not enough, again, that unless you take it and then you continually apply what you learned on the track and without the speed, then if you don't do that, then you're going to come back the next year. And it's good that you came back, because then we can get you back up to where you were the last time you went. So again, certainly a formal training, if you want to do that once a year, that would be good. If you want to do it every other year, it's fine. But the biggest, most important thing is that you just purposefully practice on your own often, every ride. And even if it's, as I was described before, when you're in traffic, just strengthen your strategies, strengthen your visualization, strengthen your mind's eye to be able to visualize what's around a blind corner, read the road, etc.
Good advice. And our last question is from Colin Piper. And he says, the reason why I asked my initial question was because I really learned a lot when training to become an MSF coach. If there was a place that offered on-street trainer training, I'd be very interested in taking it. He said, of course, a good first step will be that I'm planning to come and take your on-street course.
Yeah, that would be great. There's no other school around that I know of that's up here, so I would know. So it's a matter of I'm not hiring anybody, but at some point I'm probably going to sell the company or hand it over to somebody because at some point even this becomes work, and I will look toward some kind of retirement. But what I would do is certainly come see what it's all about, because it might be quite different than what you think it is. But you'll have a good idea of what is involved, and you'll also understand hopefully more about the type of person you need to be effective at it, and the level of knowledge and your communication skills. Those things are really key, and your ability to be able to juggle many things at once while also coaching somebody. So come on out. We'll see how things go.
And with that, we've reached the end of the questions. And I wanted to remind everyone that donating is possible to Ken to keep free information like this and free webinars and all the other stuff that Ken does coming. You could do that by going to the Writing in the Zone website and going to the donate page, and there's some pretty clear instructions on how to do it. And Ken, I know that you have a whole system, a tiered donation system set up, but you'll even take single donations at one time, right?
Yeah, you can do that actually through just through the website. It's the easiest thing, and we've got there as a product. You can go like $5, $10, whatever, and you just do that, and it's a PayPal thing. So I get a lot of people. I'll keep a list of all you guys who've given me, guys and women who've given me donations. I've got a list on a spreadsheet, and I'm gonna make sure to keep you involved at some point. My super supporters are my Patreon patrons. I've got 22, which is pretty good, and I really appreciate that you appreciate what I'm doing. But yeah, anything you can do would be great. It's really awful lot of time gets put into this, and this is 30 years of my knowledge that I'm sharing. So yeah, I'd hope that you might think that's valuable. So do what you can. Appreciate it if you could do that. Yeah, it's right at the top of the website, writinginthezone.com, and the menu, it says donate. So.
And Ken, to finish off, Lisa asked, and I didn't hit this question because I didn't scroll down, do you offer group street instruction?
Yeah, I've got my typical street instruction is 3 people, and it can be a one day or it can be a weekend. And I haven't been doing the weekends because of the COVID thing, but some of the motels around or hotels are opening up to people, just normal people. So we're going to be able to do it. I figured out that we can social distance pretty well. I've been doing a lot of private training. So if you have a group, I can absolutely accommodate you. I've got 4 people who are all friends coming the end of the month. And so there's up to that. If it's any bigger than that, then I'll have to make some accommodations to get another instructor, or we'll figure out what to do. Remember, I do have the advanced parking lot course, which I absolutely have had whole groups, the Victory Club, the Sisters, Centennial group where I did a parking lot course for them. And that's up to 10 people. This next one coming up has 8 spots open. So that's another, and it's great. I mean, I really like the parking lot course that I offer. So consider that too. Contact me, ken@writinginthezone.com, and we can talk about it.
Well, Ken, you are a great inspiration, and I really enjoy helping you out with these these webinars. It's quite an honor. And I'd like to, on your behalf, say good night to everyone and thank you for another great and instructive, full webinar. I get so much out of everyone, and I get a bunch of things to think about every time I talk to you. So thank you from all of us, and we hope to see you next Wednesday on the 8th. And Ken, do you have any idea what subject you're doing yet?
I'm going to do group riding. So this is a hot one. This one's one I get all the time, and it's really going to be focused as well on group leaders. But there's a lot of people that ride in groups, and there's questions about that. So I'm going to talk about group riding.
So the theme song for that one is going to be Leader of the Pack, right? It's got to be. Well, listen, thank you so much, Ken, and good night, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
See you later, all. Next Wednesday.